Hi, my name is Lee Schomer, and I'm a volunteer with the Epilepsy Foundation Northwest, and I also have epilepsy. Our next speaker will be Lynne Stewart, who presented earlier. She is the Program and Outreach Manager with the Epilepsy Foundation Northwest and serves as the Oregon and Southwest Washington region. She's been working for the foundation for 4 years and is really good at what she does. And prior to that was on the foundation board of directors. Lynne is experienced and talented in making connections within the community. She understands how best to bring people together for a common cause and to move groups towards higher levels of achievement. Lynne is very passionate about helping others and about what she loves and what she does that live with and care for others living with epilepsy. In her personal time, she loves spending time with her family and friends, attending her children's municipal sporting events, reading, and camping, like everyone else. So please, let's welcome Lynne.
Thank you, Lee. You can probably turn me down, Matt. I'm loud as it is. So thank you, Lee. Part of that bio, she added something, and so I didn't say I was good at what I did myself. So thank you, Lee, for saying that. This can be a challenging topic. It's as a parent of a child that's living with epilepsy, who's 18 years old now. This is something that we've had to look at in the last couple years. And so it is something that I've been researching. We've actually gone through the process, the medical process of through the DMV of driving. So it's very interesting, and I'm very excited to talk about it, answer questions the best I can. I know that Dr. Matthew Evans actually does know a lot about this and has researched as well, but it is, I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between Oregon and Washington. So if there's anyone that is here from Washington, I will talk about that because there are some differences. So to get a driver's license in most of the states, a person with epilepsy must be free of seizures. So it just varies on how long that is. Shorter intervals are being looked at, and that is from 3 to 6 months, which, as you'll see when we look more into Oregon and then the comparison of Washington, Oregon is 3 months and Washington is 6 months seizure-free. So there are some states across the U.S. that are still a year, and there's 3 states that are actually 2 years. So it's pretty interesting to see. So usually the doctor who cares for the person with epilepsy they must fill out a form and report of when the last seizure is, the type, and other relevant information. Some states actually ask doctors for the recommendation about the person's ability to drive. Others feel that the decision is really up to the DMV. So in states that do not require a specific seizure-free period, the doctor's recommendation does carry quite considerable weight. So it's becoming more and more something that states are talking about and regulating, but it's not all very clear. We're pretty clear out in the Northwest, though. In most states, the medical information and license application is reviewed. So these are just the review and decision process. So it's reviewed by the DMV. And then in complex cases, or when the decision isn't clear, then the information is forwarded to a consulting doctor or the state's medical advisory board. So the medical advisory board may also hear appeals about denying or revoking someone's driver's license. Once a decision, then decisions are made by the motor vehicle department. So they're not made by the doctors. They're not made by the medical advisory board. They're made by the motor vehicle department, but they do give their recommendations. If the decision isn't favorable for someone, the applicant can request a review. There's hearing. They can request by a judge. Now, this is where there's states that don't have a clear process, because there are states that don't have a clear process. So they can ask for that. Here in Oregon and Washington, as we get a little bit further into this, you'll see there are clear steps that people have to take. But there are certain time periods that they have to be done in. So the review and decision process, seizures that do not, some situations can be considered exceptions under certain circumstances. So do the seizures not affect consciousness, awareness of control of movement? Do seizures occur only during sleep? Do seizures that are consistently preceded by an aura? There's other things that can be exceptions. So maintaining a driver's license. If a person has been well controlled, meaning no seizures, for more than 3 to 5 years, most states will no longer require periodic medical reports. This is after you've gone through all of these processes. So that's just something to think about when looking at all of this and what you're going through. When a person has to renew their driver's license, however, they may be asked for a letter from their doctor or treating healthcare professional stating the date of the last seizure. So just that backup and that proof may be required. Please note that not reporting seizures at this time may leave you open to liability issues. I think it's extremely important to report what's going on. We are, in a day and age that people are so happy. So I think that you have to be really careful about protecting yourself as well. So reporting it. Regardless of the reporting requirements, this just goes on as what I said, if seizures recur and impair consciousness or control, stop driving and talk to your doctor. Your health and your ability to drive will need to be reevaluated. If your license is revoked, or if someone you know's license is revoked and will need to be because of a breakthrough seizure, there are certain circumstances that you can get a decision for an appeal. So it's, did your doctor prescribe or titrate you down from a certain level of medication down? Did you have a breakthrough seizure because of that? There are some things that can be looked at so that you don't lose your license. Personal liability. I think this is something that really needs to be looked at. And I'm just talking, this is information, this information is coming from the Epilepsy Foundation of America. This information is also coming from the Oregon and Washington DMV that I've researched, I've talked to them, and that we've gotten. Potential liability, though, I think, it is that. It's personal liability. We have to take that into consideration. That's something that I've been talking with my daughter about. And she still doesn't have her license. She's 18 years old. She doesn't drive. She's now over a year seizure-free, but she still doesn't have her license yet. She's going to be getting it. But I just think that it's so important, what you're putting yourself at risk, but you're also putting others. You're putting pedestrians. You're putting other people in other cars at risk. And so I think, just really being mindful of that. Without notifying the State Department, and if you were to cause a seizure, you can be at a high liability risk. So just be thinking about that. Some states do have mandatory reporting laws. We in Oregon are one of them. California, Delaware, Nevada, New Jersey, Oregon, and Pennsylvania are mandatory reporting state. What does that mean? It's been, it gets talked about, and this is where when the panel comes up, if you have questions, I'm sure that some of them can answer. Is that correct, Dr. Evans? Doctors are liable in the state of Oregon. I'm just going to go here to Oregon. So here in Oregon, driver licensing laws, DMV appeal of license denial. Yes, they can. Doctor report of epilepsy. Yes. Periodic medical updates required after licensing at the discretion of DMV. Seizure-free period is only 3 months. Now, I'm going to click on up to Washington. Washington, the DMV appeal of license denial, yes. Doctors to report. It is not a mandatory state, not a mandatory reporting state. Periodic medical updates required after licensing at the discretion of the Medical Advisory Board. And the seizure-free period is 6 months with exceptions. So back to Oregon. So if a person is reported, here's what I'm going to say first, though. A doctor is mandated by law to report. They're immune in good faith to report. They're immune if they don't report. So they don't have to report. I know it says mandatory, but I think that that's where some of the question comes in. When is it the responsibility of ourself, or as a parent, or as a caregiver, or as your personal, or the doctor? So those are some of the things that, if it brings up question, just note they're immune from civil liability. So if there's two things in the state of Oregon, you can be reported by your doctor, or there can be a involuntary reporting, which is, it could be a relative, it could be a neighbor, it could be anyone. And so what happens is there's different process that you go through. There's different paperwork that you go through that you have to fill out. It still has to go to your doctor, still has to list the last date of your seizure, what medication you're on, all of that. But it can be a different appeal process. They can also, appealing a decision, in Oregon, a person must request a hearing before a division hearing officer. And then what happens is the request, if they are denied, then, or the license is revoked, meaning they get suspended, then the request must be written and submitted within 20 days of the division's order. Then the hearing decision may be appealed to the Court of Appeals. So the appeal must be filed within 60 days of the decision. Here is where I talked about they're immune. So the exact wording in the Oregon law is physicians and healthcare providers are required to report to the DMV persons age 14 and older with severe and uncontrollable impairments. An uncontrollable impairment is defined as one that cannot be controlled by medication, therapy, surgery, or adaptive devices. Physicians and healthcare providers who make reports in good faith are immune from liability that might otherwise result from making the report. They are also immune from liability if they do not make reports. Washington. To be eligible for licensing, an individual must be seizure-free or free from losses of consciousness for 6 months. So there's just a little bit difference in the length of time, same types of things, same reportings. The appeal process is a little bit different. A person must appeal to the Department of Licensing. They'll inform the driver of an opportunity for a hearing, interview and hearing, and then written notice of appeal must be given. Then the person, if they're dissatisfied, the decision then within 10 days from the date of notice, they need to make a written request for a formal hearing. Then they go into a formal hearing, and it has to be pretty quickly. Doesn't give the length of time exactly, but they say formal hearing as soon as possible. If the individual is dissatisfied from that outcome of the hearing, he or she may appeal within 30 days to the Superior Court in the county that they reside in. In the state of Washington, physicians are not granted statutory immunity from liability for the information they provide to the DMV or from liability for damages arising out of an accident caused by a seizure. Physicians are not required to report patients who have been treated for or diagnosed as having epilepsy to a central state agency. Driving laws are really written to protect public safety all the way around, regardless if someone has seizures or not, for multiple reasons. So, you know, there are people think of seizures and they think, well, I can't drive because I have grand mal seizures. There are several types of seizures that it might not be a good idea that you drive. My daughter was having 1.2 absent seizures every minute. Probably wouldn't have been a good idea that she was driving. So to miss 3 to 30 seconds out of every minute is a long time. So, or complex partial seizures while driving can be just as deadly. I think that, you know, it says that studies have shown that the rate of motor vehicle accidents for people with epilepsy is higher than average rate. It's nowhere near drinking and driving rate. In some cases, accidents involving epilepsy are caused by people, this was interesting to me, who are actually driving without a license or who failed to report. So those that are reporting or actually get a license are not the ones having accidents. I guess they're the ones abiding by the law. So, you know, when you're applying for a license, report it so that they can help you and so you can go through the process. My daughter did go through the process. She was cleared to drive. She had a seizure. We didn't drive. We reported it. Every 6 months she has to report. So they send her a letter and she has to report it. She still doesn't have her license, but when she's 3 months seizure free, we allow her to start driving with us again. But we don't allow her to be alone. Our decision was a year, so that she had to be seizure free. She's over that, so she's looking at possibly going to get her license. And this can be a very hard thing. For my daughter, she was diagnosed when she was 10 years old. But for a lot of people, they're being diagnosed when they're in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s and older, and they've been driving, and they lose their independence. What I really want to encourage you is, one, be open with your doctor. Be open because they can help. They can suggest things. They can give ideas. If you're open with them, I think you're more likely to be able to find that there's other ways that you can get around too, transportation-wise. We're looking at those things. We're looking at funding for other options. So it's, you know, what kind of grants can we get and that kind of thing. I get people that call in and say, does anyone need to be driven around somewhere? You know, so I have their name and then I can call upon them if we need it. So there's other things that can be done, or get to a place where they have good transportation if moving is a possibility. We do have pretty good transportation in Portland. So that's nice. But when you're out in more rural areas, it can be challenging. It can be difficult. But my biggest thing is just really communicating with others, your support system, and your medical community, your healthcare provider. Any questions? Yeah.
I just went through this process with my teenage son, and it's interesting. There's a lot of misinformation,
Yeah.
even from the DMV. I talked to them a couple of times, and they basically told me, "Hey, you've been seizure free for 6 months." At that time, it was 6 months, not 3 months ago again. They don't. It's fine. You didn't have a license. What's a license then? You just have a permit.
Right.
So I don't know if that was right or wrong.
It's actually not right. It's wrong because my daughter doesn't have her license, and you still have to go through it. But there is a certain department, and I can get that for you. Oh,
My
the
husband
safety.
works for the DMV, for
Oh.
goodness sake.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just think there's a lot of misinformation. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Even at the DMV.
Yeah. I think it's just dependent. If you walk into the DMV, they don't know much.
No, you have to go down and talk to the state.
Yeah, and that's who I talk with, and not because of my daughter, but just because of knowing and understanding when people call, but also is no, because when we go in the first time, we asked them, and they said, yeah, you don't need to mark it because she hasn't had one in over 3 months, which was not true, and so. It's a hard call. What do you do? But what's right? I think it's going to come back to haunt you if you're not doing what's right and what the law is. So we just really encourage, it's kind of the same thing. If, you're feeling good and you decide to stop your medication, I wouldn't encourage that. Again, go back and talk to your medical provider because it might come back to haunt you. So, yeah, there is. But if you can call upon us or your healthcare provider, we're willing to walk through those steps with you and get you to the right people. Definitely. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay, I didn't hear you. Yeah, that is part of the medical process. Again, it will come down to most likely doctor recommendation in that instance. If it is confined to sleep only, but they are one. Yeah.
How about at the permit level?
It's the same. Like I said, my daughter only has her permit, so it's the same process. They're still driving. No, it's not with someone, but it's still the length of time is the same. Yeah. And from my understanding and talking to the safe driving department, if that's revoked during the permit, it will be a little bit harder to get it reinstated for driving. There's more red tape a little bit. Paperwork's different. Yeah.
So my question is, why is there not a standard set of rules all across the United States so that each state? I mean,
Well, there's a good answer for that. We're not standardized on any issue across America in each state. I mean, on any issue, it's all different. It's the state regulated. So, I personally like the 6 month or longer, but that's just me personally. That's not. Dr. Evans said that I'd be kicked to the curb and stoned if people heard me say it should be a year. But that's me. But, my daughter was 39 weeks seizure free. Boom. Out of the blue. No auras. 45 weeks. Boom. As a parent and a citizen, it's hard to put them behind the wheel and know that they could hurt themselves or someone else. I just wasn't willing to take that risk. I haven't been willing. But it's hard. I can't imagine being an adult and someone telling me I can't drive. So I can empathize with people also, though. Any other questions? Great. I'd like to